I said that because I know Harry did it.
Okay, I think that means that we're live. So welcome everyone watching on Facebook Live to the first and I believe only debate for the State Senate's 10th District. This hour-long debate, sponsored by the New Haven Independent, WNHH-FM and La Voz Hispana, will take place over Zoom and can be watched live on the Independent's Facebook page. And we will be talking today with Gary Winfield and Jason Bartlett. Gary is a Democrat who has represented the 10th State Senate District since 2014. The district covers portions of New Haven and West Haven. And Jason Bartlett petitioned his way onto the November 3rd ballot as an independent candidate. He's the former director of the Youth Services Department in the city of New Haven. Joining me today in asking questions, my name is Tom Breen. I should say I'm the managing editor of the New Haven Independent. I'm joined by Babs Rawls-Ivy, the Inner City News, and WNHH's Love Babs, Love Talk, Mary O'Leary from the New Haven Register, and Norma Rodriguez-Reyes from La Voz Hispana and WNHH. So a few ground rules. There will be no opening statements. The four media representatives will take turns posing questions, and the person getting the question will have 90 seconds to answer. The other candidate will then have 90 seconds to respond. So each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer each question. And if a response has specific allegations against a speaker, the other candidate will have an opportunity to respond 30 seconds or so. At around 7:50, so towards the end of the debate, we're going to ask the candidates to ask at least one, maybe a few questions to each other. And then before we wrap up, before 8 o'clock, we're going to ask the candidates to give a 90-second closing statement. So with that, let's jump right into the debate. And let me first say, Senator Winfield and Ms. Bartlett, thanks so much for joining. It's a pleasure to have you all here.
Thank you.
So Babs, you are kicking us off with the first question. Babs Rawls-Ivy from the Inner City News. The floor is yours.
Good evening. It's so lovely to see you, Senator Winfield, and lovely to see you, Jason Bartlett. How nice to do this tonight. So as you understand it, talk to me a little bit about when you hear people say defund the police department, what comes to your mind and what do you understand that to mean?
And Babs, maybe directed to one, who do you want to respond first?
Oh, now I'm muted.
You're on mute.
I would like, I do this every day, right? I'd like, this question goes to Jason Bartlett. Can they both respond? Can they both answer this question? I'd like them both.
They'll both respond, but we'll have Jason go
But
first.
Jason Bartlett can start and Gary Winfield can go after him. Thank you.
So what I understand it to mean is rethinking how we address or respond to crime. And I think a part of that for me in terms of a transformative approach would be including the community health workers, mental health workers in terms of responses. And I think that a great majority of crime calls that we get are from people who are having substance abuse issues, domestic crime. There's a lot of mental health issues just in the country and the world. And so the training of a police officer to deal with someone with mental health issues, we asked a lot of them. And so it's an opportunity to respond with others in the community to help do de-escalation and things such as that. I am not someone who believes that we should just defund the police. I think that it has to be a thoughtful approach about how we go about this transformation. But I think it's one that's necessary. For example, there's a movement underway to take all school resource officers out of schools, and I oppose that. I oppose that because I think each community is different. And so in New Haven, when I worked with police officers in the schools, they were very much advocates for our young people. We actually had the lowest arrests in the state of Connecticut in terms of our schools. Why? Because we had a police force that was trained. We had school resource officers that were working with the community, working with
and
myself.
Jason, I'm afraid you've hit a few seconds past the 90-second mark. Could you finish this sentence, and then we'll let Senator Winfield respond. And I'll send each of you a message when you're like 10 seconds away from your.
So I just don't think that we should be slashing the police budget, but I think that we need to be thoughtful about how we actually police going forward.
Sorry, I hit the wrong button for a second. So when I think of defunding the police, it goes back to conversations that I've been involved in for a very long time, actually with police. So during my time in the state Senate and prior to that in the state House, I've had some efforts around reforming what policing is. And every time that there's been one of these efforts, what has come to me from police is that we ask them to do things that are outside of their job, including show up to domestic situations, interacting with people with mental health issues, et cetera, and they're not equipped for that. And so as I hear people talking about defunding the police, what I'm hearing largely is that we should reallocate resources and do a lot of what actually has come from the police. Now, interestingly, when we've done some of the bills that we've done in 2015, 2019, and this year, police have come to oppose that very notion. But that's what I hear. And if we're having an honest conversation, there is a subset that wants to just take money away from policing. But I think largely that's not what we're talking about. What we are talking about is moving resources to the places with the individuals who are equipped to do the job. And that's part of why in the bills that we've passed, you'll see that in the 2019 bill was a task force that we created, some work around doing some work around the mental health community. In the current bill, we added more tasks to the task force to look at what policing is and whether or not we can move work to social workers. So that's how I understand defunding police.
That was pretty close to the 90-second mark. Thank you, Senator Winfield. Mary O'Leary from the New Haven Register, you're up next with our next question. And you're on mute, Mary. Oh, looks like you're still on mute. Maybe let's go over to maybe Norma. Can you ask our next question as Mary figures out the sound controls? If that's okay with you, Norma Rodriguez-Reyes from La Voz Hispana.
Okay. This question is from Senator Gary Winfield. Your opponent criticized the legislature for not holding committee hearings online during pandemic this spring and basically shutting down the legislature branch of government. Was he right? And as a committee chair, did you drop the ball?
So I have heard that criticism. The legislature prior to COVID wasn't set up to do remote hearings. And in the session that we had a set of rules that didn't allow for that. During the special session, as you know, we had several bills that came out of the special session. The rules in the special session dealt with that. And it actually took quite a while. And I would say that many legislators were very much about the business of getting to holding hearings, knowing that there were many bills that people had been looking forward to. There were many discussions that were pertinent to the people of the state. But it's not as easy as going from this is something you've never done to doing it. At this point, we figured out, I think, largely how we do it. And we've had several hearings. My committee actually was the test for doing this. And I think going forward, we have a better sense of how to do this, and it will be incorporated into our rules so that we can do it.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that question. And I was a critic, and I still am. I think the legislature's abdicated its responsibility to the governor. during this pandemic. I think that they've taken a very lackadaisical attitude. We have people who are suffering, who are jobless. Unemployment situation is still ridiculous. You can't get anyone on the phone still. People don't have their benefits. DMV takes over 5 weeks to process a registration for a car. We're looking at COVID maybe having an uptick and maybe having a second wave. And to say, oh, well, we didn't have rules and we couldn't, it's so bureaucratic an answer. People are suffering and they expect the leadership to take a stand, to make things happen, to solve issues. And that's just not happened with the Connecticut legislature. The senator was very loud about people being in prison and not being let out. But the only solution that he had was a couple of letters to the governor versus holding a hearing and putting the Commissioner of Corrections in front of him and making him testify and everyone else testify as to what his issue was. So it's been a lack of leadership. And I think that's where people are really frustrated today. It's a lot of, holding signs and rah, 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 but not a lot of action. And I think that as we go forward, we need someone of action. And I'm that person. I'm an advocate. I'm not afraid to get my hands dirty. And I'm not afraid to stand up to the governor, other legislators, my own leadership, and say, we need to get something done. We don't need to wait 8 months to change legislative rules so that we can actually have a meeting. That could have happened. And it didn't happen.
You hit the 90-second mark, Jason. Could you finish your, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you finish your, good. I want to give the senator 30 seconds to respond, particularly in Mr. Bartlett's statements that the state legislature abdicated its responsibilities to the governor, and that you could have done more than take to the streets, perhaps hold a hearing in which you asked formal questions to the DOC commissioner. You have 30 seconds to respond to Mr. Bartlett's response.
Yeah, and I appreciate his thought. He would be incorrect on how things would work. I know some people don't care about rules, and I know sometimes rules are cumbersome, but the rules actually govern how we operate, and they have to be changed in order to change that. Committee chair cannot just do anything that a committee chair wants. I've been a committee chair of more committees than anyone who's sitting in a legislature, so I happen to know that. The point is, I spent my time getting into it with the governor. There were articles day after day after day after day of me calling the governor out on his response. So I think that I would love to have had it be different, but I did what was possible given the time and spent every day, if you go back and you Google my name, talking about this in the press so that we could raise the issue and elevate it.
Thank you, Senator.
Tom, could I just follow up? One little follow-up on that. $11 million went to Hartford to reopen the schools. We got $2.5 million. Just another example of failed leadership by the legislature.
We'll get to schools. We'll get to schools in a second.
No, that's not even a school education issue. That's just a leadership issue. Mm-hmm.
We're getting out of line. Let's go through the line, and then you can bring up that issue. Okay. All right, Mary O'Leary from the New Haven Register. It looks like you're on mic, so you are up for the next question.
Thank you. Sorry about that. The state of Connecticut, as usual, this coming year and how it has been for quite a few years, has revenue problems. So I'm just wondering, this is for both candidates, I guess, if they're going to work towards decriminalizing marijuana, and then how they would handle expunging the records of people that have had been arrested, particularly for not so serious crime.
And Mary, could you direct your question to one candidate for a first response?
Sure, I guess Jason.
Sure. So I am for decriminalizing marijuana, and I would definitely attach it to expunging people's records. So I won't support the effort unless we're including that. I think it's been very unfair, and it's been an injustice to Black and brown communities that have really suffered because of a pot conviction and or violation of parole or what have you. So I think that I would definitely be a supporter. When I was in the legislature, I was a state representative out of Danbury 12 years ago. I supported medical marijuana, voted for that, and I will continue to vote to decriminalize.
Yeah, and I think it's obvious that I would be a supporter of decriminalizing and legalizing marijuana, given that I've been a lead sponsor of the bills to do so. I also, on the issue of criminal records, this past session that did not see its way to the end, I had a bill to do just that, not just as it relates to marijuana, but to deal with the issue of records as time goes forward. As you know, the session started off with the governor with the bill, and I disagreed with the governor's bill. I didn't think it went far enough, so rewrote the bill, and the committee was in the process of looking at the bill that would expunge records after a period of time. And as part of the session, it didn't happen. But I will, should I win, bring that bill back because that's been part of the work that I've been doing and will continue to do.
Thank you both for that. Now it's my turn to ask a question. I'm going to ask Senator Winfield to respond first, and then Mr. Bartlett. How has the COVID-19 pandemic affected you personally and professionally? And what specific public health policies or funding priorities would you support as a state senator if elected around the state's response to the pandemic?
Yeah, so it's had direct impact on my life. My wife is a CNA. She works at a nursing home where they've had COVID. So at the beginning of this, we were very much concerned about it coming into the home, not just because of general interactions, but specifically because of the work that she does. My mother-in-law, who lives with us, contracted COVID-19. So that was a big issue in our family's lives. And as a state legislator, given what's happened with unemployment, given what's happened with all of the issues around state agencies, we've spent the spring into the summer and still ongoing. I just got off the phone earlier with someone dealing with an issue, dealing with these issues and trying to open up the pathways to get what they need out of government. I've supported almost all of the things that the governor has done in terms of his executive order. I think that we should be listening to those who are experts in public health and deriving our policy from those who know best, not a political solution, but a solution based in medicine.
And Jason Bartlett?
For myself, I haven't been able to see my grandbabies. One was just born a month ago, so that's affected our family. Me personally, the unemployment, just the total shutdown of state government and lack of responsiveness to, just the various issues that are out there. It's not just me, but hundreds of thousands of people that have not been able to get their unemployment benefits or have been somehow injured economically. I think that seniors, as I've walked door to door, we've seen seniors suffering in terms of, just the infrastructure of their buildings, not being able to go out, not being able to get visits by people. So just hearing those stories has had an effect. I did some restaurant work since I was 16 years old, part-time, and seeing coworkers just not being able to work or make enough money to support. So as we look towards the future in terms of solutions, I would hope that we would be more innovative in terms, as a government, in terms of helping people, that we have, for example, permits, instant permits that can be issued so that not just one street in New Haven, but many, many streets in New Haven have tents on them, and we have restaurants with heaters outside so that we can have a restaurant industry going forward. That the state of Connecticut steps up and does small business loans and loan forgiveness programs, and we set up banks so that our small businesses can survive during this period.
That's it. You hit the 100-second mark. So if there's one more sentence you want to say, but that's...
Well, I just, in terms of renters and landlords, that the state needs to step in and maybe supplement landlords, and definitely continuing to not have people evicted from their homes, whether for foreclosure or for lack of paying rent.
Thank you. Babs Rawls-Ivy from the Inner City News. It is your turn to ask another question.
Gary, it is often said, or I hear quite often from businesses, that Connecticut isn't a very business-friendly state. And the pandemic has been devastating to a lot of our businesses, particularly the restaurants and bars in our state. What as senator can you do to provide support and help to our businesses, our existing businesses that are suffering and trying to stay afloat?
So it has been very difficult for businesses, and we know that the federal government had some loans through PPP and other avenues. The state government through DECD did some of that work as well. There's ongoing discussion about how do we continue to support businesses, and that's something that we are part of. Going into the year that we're going into, the honest situation is that it's very difficult given what the budget looks like. But I think all of us who are elected are hearing from businesses and very much engaged in the work of talking to the executive branch and DECD and figuring out what it is that we can actually do to put aside monies to support the businesses that exist. And in terms of small businesses, one of the things we want to do is look at, yes, the existing businesses, but also look at what small business will be because of the fact that we have COVID. One of the ways that the state as a whole can grow itself is by supporting small businesses, and out of COVID will come businesses to deal with things like masking technologies and those things. And the state should be very keen about putting some support towards those as well.
I just think that that's a lot of excuses. There's always never enough money. But when the government wants to actually solve a problem, or they want to actually do something, they come up with the money. And I think that that's the kind of attitude that we have to take to the legislature. And that's the kind of demand that we must put on the governor and our colleagues. We don't accept $11 million going to Hartford for education and New Haven getting $2.5 million. We don't accept, we don't have any money to help small businesses. No, we take money, we reallocate money if we have to. We put it into a small business bank fund, and we ask our small businesses, what kind of assistance do you need? Maybe we reduce some regulations or reduce some taxes on them so that they can survive. Maybe we bond some to assist folks. I just don't think that, it's a pandemic. It's something that it's going to take some time to get out of. And we don't just rely on a President Trump, who we know is not going to come and help us. We have to rely on ourselves. And I think the state of Connecticut is in actually a very good position. We have a rainy day fund. It's historic. It's the first time in 12 years we have the most money saved in a rainy day fund, but we can't help small businesses. But we can't open up the unemployment office so that people can get their unemployment check. It's a lot of excuses for a lot of inaction. And it's time that we stop playing the party game and stop worrying about, who we're going to hurt with our answer, and actually start making some demands and delivering services for our people.
If I might.
Yeah, Senator, I'll give you 30 seconds to respond.
Yeah, so I don't know where Mr. Bartlett's going to get the money. The state has a deficit. Yes, we have a rainy day fund, but that money is going to go. We also can't spend money a certain way. We have a volatility cap. We have a bond lock. We have things we have to do in order to actually run the state. It is pretty easy to say what we would like to do. If I were just talking about what I would like to do, I would say all kinds of things. But if I'm talking about what I can actually do as a state senator, which is the job that Mr. Bartlett is vying for, then it's a different story. And the conversation we should have with the public is a realistic conversation. That's not excuses, that's reality.
Well, I remind the senator, I was a legislator. I know what we're capable of doing, and we're more than capable of helping people, and we're more than capable of reallocating resources if we want to.
Okay, I think that we're going to move on to the next question now. Norma Rodriguez-Reyes from La Voz Hispana, the floor is yours.
Okay. All right, this question is for Jason. Jason, your opponent has been heralded as the leading force at the Capitol behind successful legislation to ban the death penalty, tackle racial profiling, and now hold police accountability for crimes in Connecticut. Do you disagree with those goals? And if not, how do you make a case against voting for him?
I don't disagree with any of the goals. I was actually a legislator and worked with the senator. He was actually a mentee of mine on some issues, but we did the death penalty. I voted for it with him. The police accountability bill, though, I think is a great example of him not being able to get the job done. We took a very emotional response to an issue instead of a thoughtful one. When he took over as chair of Judish, he said, well, maybe I shouldn't be the chair because he's not an attorney. And I have to agree with him because I don't think he's qualified and or ready to be the chair of Judiciary, because that bill in particular shows a failure. It shows the status quo. It was done so that Democrats would have something to say that they did in response to Black Lives Matter. Okay. Chokeholds was not taken out of the bill. Okay. The no-knock warrants was not taken out of the bill. There was a week and a half worth of discussion around qualified immunity, which, you know, they just made the issue even more confusing because it's a federal issue. They tried to redefine it in the bill, and then they threw their hands up and said, well, actually, we don't know what we're talking about, but we're going to study it later. You know, it was a sop, and it actually doesn't speak to the social injustices. As chair of Judish, he's afraid to stand up to the judges. An African-American woman came before his committee and asked him for help, Demisha Moore, and said, you know, there's a judge that has done improprieties. And I ask you to look into this judge before you just go ahead and just renominate him and confirm him. And, you know,
you're at the 110-second mark, Jason. Jason, wrap it up.
Okay. We have a confirmation hearing that's happening in DC that's doing exactly that. And I would submit to you that the same thing has happened in Connecticut because our judiciary chair has not actually stood up to the powers that be.
Senator.
Yeah, I don't know what police accountability bill Mr. Bartlett's read, and I'm not sure what he's talking about. But first, qualified immunity wasn't stripped out and just studied. Qualified immunity remained in the bill. It's one of the things that animates the opposition to the bill right now. In terms of whether this bill was a bill that was just a showcase or not, the response to the police should tell you that it wasn't just a showcase, but also the fact that there are 43 sections of the bill. The bill was opposed by the opposition to it for 10 and a half hours when it went up. This is not a bill that was just a response to say that we're doing something for Black Lives Matter. And in terms of failure, if you look across this state, there are a lot of people who have a lot to say, as Mr. Bartlett does, but you don't have a lot of bills that have come up. The reason that you have a bill here is because, unlike what he's suggesting, I am not afraid of the police. I'm not afraid of judges. And I put a bill forward, moved the bill at a time when that should have happened and it's not happening anywhere else in the country. That's the fact.
Thank you. We're going to move on to Mary O'Leary from the New Haven Register. Mary, you're up.
Hi, this question is for Gary. Because it's a tie now on appointing the Inspector General to look into prosecuting police. Would you agree to increase the pool? I mean, people go outside prosecutors as the only potential people that would fill that role.
So, Mary, is that the yeah? So the reason that prosecutors are the ones who are being selected is because of the amendment to the Constitution that requires that these cases are prosecuted by prosecutors. And without changing the Constitution, that is what we have to do if we want to have the independent prosecution here. I think, though, even given the situation that we currently are in, the pool could have been broader. There's nothing that says that the person can't be hired in for that purpose and become a prosecutor. The only thing that the amendment requires is that they go through the process that the prosecutors that currently exist go through. So you could broaden the pool and hire them in specifically for that purpose. That could be done. But let me just say, this is part of an ongoing effort to reform policing. In 2015, when I did the bill on police reform, we took the prosecution out of the district. In 2019, when I did the bill, we took the prosecution and we said that the chief state prosecutor could do it to further make it independent. In 2020, we created the independent prosecutor / inspector general. This is an effort that has been moving us forward for a number of years. And I think that while it happened the way it happened, that's not necessarily how it had to happen, given the way that the bill is structured.
Thank you.
2015, police reform, we still got status quo. 2019 runs another bill, police reform, still the status quo. 2020, we run a bill, we still have the same status quo in Connecticut. Now we have an inspector general. What is that? More bureaucracy. Why were some of the police upset with the senator? Because he didn't talk to the police. They actually wrote an editorial that said, he didn't even come and talk to his own local police department. Maybe he should have started there. And in terms of my original point that he didn't address, is that judges have an 8-year term. I'm committed to making that a 4-year term, and they should go back in front, because it's not just about the police. It's about the whole system. And somebody needs to actually be talking about the whole system: judges, prosecutors, and police. So there's prosecutorial misconduct that must be addressed, and judges and their improprieties and their not lack of interest. And there have been plenty of judges, but we never call them to the carpet. We're not actually holding them accountable. And as the chair of Judish, that's Gary's opportunity, and he has not done it. He's walked and tried to shut down a street, but he hasn't shut down the Judiciary Committee to get the kind of change that he could get that is within his power. And he talks about, I don't have the power, we don't have the power, you don't know the rules. I know the rules. I was in the legislature. They get to create their own rules. They create the rules. And he has failed to do that. He's been there 12 years, and he has failed to lead.
Senator, I want to give you 30 seconds to respond about communication with the police union or holding judges accountable, anything you'd like.
Yeah, the chief wrote a letter to the newspaper that was inaccurate. There was a discussion about the violence in the community, in which I said during the discussion with 70 plus people on it, Chief, I have heard that you've been trying to make contact with us, and we're getting ready to do this police accountability bill. I want to make sure that we can have contact. The chief said, I don't need your phone number, which I was trying to offer him because he could contact me. And I said, great, let's talk about it. And I reached out to several police structures, including AFSCME, including the state police, including many of those who we talked to. So the notion that I didn't talk to police is inaccurate, and some of them have actually said that. So Mr. Bartlett can glom on to what they have said. That's great. It's just not true. In terms of what I've done, I have a record. The record speaks for it. We've changed the way policing happens in the state. And I recognize that Mr. Bartlett wants to be the senator, but he should represent to the people that he's looking to represent the truth.
Okay, I want to kind of reset for a second. For everyone listening and watching on Facebook Live, welcome. Thanks for being with us. This is a debate between the two of the three candidates for the State Senate's 10th District. Gary Winfield is the incumbent Democrat and also endorsed by the Working Families Party. Jason Bartlett has petitioned onto the ballot. And the Republican candidate, Carlos Alvarado, decided not to participate in the debate. So we have two of the candidates participating, and I'm Tom Breen. I'm the managing editor of the New Haven Independent, joined by an all-star panel of local reporters: Babs Rawls-Ivy from the Inner City News, Norma Rodriguez-Reyes from La Voz Hispana, and Mary O'Leary from the New Haven Register. Now it's my turn again to ask a question, so I'm going to ask Jason first and then over to Gary, and it's about the upcoming election. Will you be voting absentee or in person this election? Why? Whichever way you're going. And do you think Connecticut is ready for this unprecedented election? Are we ready for an unprecedented amount of absentees, and why? So Jason first, and then over to Gary.
I'll be voting in person. It's just my preference. I think everyone has to make their own decision, what feels right to them. People have different health concerns and whatnot. So I just hope that everyone votes. I mean, that's the key, is we have to get more folks voting. I would ask you to look at 3G first. So I'm all the way down, as you pointed out, a petitioning candidate. You have to go down and look for me and circle me in. So if you can do that first and then, catch the rest. But I'll definitely be voting in person. I think that I don't think that we're ready for this amount, which is unfortunate. A number of us have been pushing for early voting in the state of Connecticut for a very long time. I am thrilled that the legislature did what it had to do to allow people to vote early and to vote by absentee. But we need to get rid of the structure that we have. If it's a constitutional amendment, I'll be voting for that. But I think there may be other ways to address it. Right now, I think ballots are going out to the wrong districts. I know that that's happened in our district already. I think that there's been some other problems. So hopefully they'll be mitigated, and we'll have an election that is done properly and that people can have confidence in. And I hope that our experience in doing this will help actually get us to a period where we just do early voting as part of our norms.
Thank you. Senator?
I will be voting in person. I think it's possible to go in person, particularly if you're healthy and younger, and I will do so. I usually vote right at 6 o'clock in the morning, so that also allays some of the fear potentially of having long lines and crowded areas. I think in terms of whether or not we are prepared for this election, I think we have seen some things that give rise and concern, and obviously there have been concerns about that and conversations going on. But I think we won't actually know until the election's over. We should be prepared. There have been people early voting and voting by absentee in this country for decades now, and there is history that can be looked to for how to do this. And as the conversations progress, that's part of what's going on in those conversations, looking at what the best practices are. So, yeah, I'll be voting in person. I think it's the thing to do. I think it guarantees that the vote will be counted. I've counseled people when I've knocked on doors that if they're voting absentee to get that ballot down to the box to make sure that it gets counted, because we all know there are issues with the mail, and we want to make sure that everybody, however they're voting, their vote gets counted.
Thank you very much, both of you. And now we're back for a third round of questions. Babs, you're at the top. The floor is yours.
Jason, New Haven is an urban center and has a large urban youth population. If you were to be senator, what would you do to help New Haven take care of its young people and activities or education or any of those kinds of things to help New Haven youth realize their full potential?
Sure. Well, I was the youth director, so my passion really is our young people, youth and education. So that's what I'm committed to. I think that we need to bring restorative practices statewide to stop the school to prison pipeline. One of the accomplishments that I think that we did in New Haven that I was a major part of was reducing expulsions from 200 a year when I started as youth director to like 14 when I left. And that's the real school to prison pipeline. So getting our young people jobs, mentoring, mental health services. This can be done statewide and definitely needs to be done in our cities. So that all of our kids get a second chance. I was the founder of Youth Staff Wraparound Services, getting the city and the Board of Education and our community groups working together to have a success plan for every kid. I'd like to see that implemented in a greater way and have more resources for it. We had youth employment. I started to actually do youth employment all year long. We only used to do summer employment in New Haven. I'd like to see more monies go toward that. In the budget every year, Hartford gets $1 million. We get like 400,000. So we're not able to actually employ every kid. We definitely need to get more resources, get more monies to make sure that all of our kids who want a job can get a job. So I'm committed to that. I'm committed to more safe spaces around the city. The Trowbridge gym, there's a bill in that I asked for to have that renovated. So making sure that we have some more artificial fields, making sure that our parks are actually something that we can be proud of. In education, I mentioned earlier, we wanted to reopen schools. Our kids aren't getting an education.
And
$11 million.
You've hit the 110-second mark, Jason. So maybe one more sentence, and then
one more time. $11 million goes towards Hartford, and we get $2.5 million, and we have the same demographic. And that happens over and over and over again in terms of education, and I'm just not going to tolerate that.
Thank you. And Senator Winfield.
Yeah, thank you. I think that first, let me say that the work done around UStat is really good work. I think the work done around UStat made perfect sense. It built on the work that came out of Boston and work that came out of Comstat, and I know that some of you know this. I was doing some work with police officer Dusabar before UStat. On CT Rebat and similar work. And in 2012, also because of the work that I've been doing in the state and across the country, I was part of a panel that came together and brought together some experts. I was one of the liaisons actually to convene the experts to create what became the school discipline consensus project, which actually is where a lot of the thinking following on from that came from. Not just in the state of Connecticut, but across the country. I've sat on the JJPOC, changing the way that schools and police operate where it comes to our youth. In terms of money, there are requests that come from the city, and the delegation endeavors to get the monies that the city asks for. That is actually how the process works. And in terms of what happened recently, when we found out what happened, which we didn't know prior to the news stories about the allocations of money, there were further conversations, and we've gone back and looked at that, and there are changes being made. But in terms of what the senator would be doing, the senator would be engaged in the appropriation and or finance process, more than likely one. And the appropriations process is a process in which there are pushes and pulls. You go in with the monies that are requested of your city, and your attempt is to get that out of that, but that's not all that you do. And you have to be able to convince people to come to your way of seeing things.
Senator, I'm sorry to interrupt, but if you could wrap it up in a sentence. Thank you.
Well, I was just going to say that my opponent keeps talking about he was in the legislature, but he didn't demonstrate the ability while in the legislature to get people to come to his way of seeing things.
Well, why do you
Jason, I'll give you 30 seconds. Sorry, 30 seconds to respond, Jason.
Well, listen, $500 million goes to Hartford. The senator votes $500 million to bail out Hartford, but he cuts New Haven in that same year, our budget, by $9.5 million. Every taxpayer got 11% increase due to the fact that Senator Winfield doesn't pay attention to budgetary matters. Goes ahead and bails out one city and doesn't even look out for his own city, nor does he look out for West Haven. They put the MARB in with West Haven. West Haven actually does better on finances, and the MARB increases the taxes, and Senator Winfield has nothing to say about it, doesn't really engage in what's happening in West Haven. These tax increases that everyone's getting is a result of having a junior senator that's not doing his job nor caring about the budget whatsoever.
And going to cut you off there. Senator, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to respond to that as well before we move on to Norma's next question.
Yeah, I just think, again, Mr. Bartlett is inaccurate. And if it were what Mr. Bartlett was suggesting, I find it interesting that the mayor, who I don't participate in, would actually endorse me, not only publicly, but at the convention that we both attended. I've been in many meetings. I've lent support to the efforts of West Haven. I am directly involved in the budget process. I'm senior on the Appropriations Committee, and Mr. Bartlett just simply either doesn't understand or wants people to vote for him so badly he's willing not to tell it like it is.
So you didn't give $500 million to Hartford and cut us $9.5 million?
And we're going to move on to the next question. I feel like you both have gotten your points in on this case. All right, Mary O'Leary, Norma Rodriguez-Reyes, and then Mary after that. Norma, you're up next.
This one is for Gary Winfield. This is in the U.S. Supreme Court gets rid of Roe versus Wade and of the Affordable Care Act. Which, if any, action should the state legislator take in response?
So I think I will speak generally and specifically to Connecticut. I think state legislatures should make sure that their states are protected. They should have laws in place that deal with the ability to have access to abortion, which Connecticut does, and they should have a healthcare infrastructure that allows for people to still afford healthcare, which Connecticut does and is working on. And you may have seen in the last session, the special session, that we did some work around insurance, and there's further work that we're going to be doing in the upcoming session. So I think legislatures should be making sure that should the unfortunate event that Roe versus Wade is overturned, or the Affordable Care Act, that states pick up the mantle.
I co-sign to that. I completely co-sign to what he says. And actually, I wish he had that attitude all the way across the board. On budgetary issues, the state needs to pick up the mantle. On COVID, we need to pick up the mantle and do what we need to do. On education, we need to actually take care of our young people and close the achievement gap and get the resources to them. We need to stop making excuses and do exactly what he says and pick up the mantle and deliver for the citizens. Not just because of Roe versus Wade and what's happening in DC, so on and so forth. We need to do it for women's issues, for the social justice movement, for education, and for that taxpayer. All those issues, he should have that same attitude.
And Mary, you're up. Mary O'Leary from the New Haven
Right.
Register.
Thank you. One of the biggest problems in the state is the lack of affordable housing, particularly for the center cities and particularly for New Haven, which is very active in trying to rectify this. How can you work with the suburbs to actually make this happen? There was a group that just went to Woodbridge and made it very clear that basically they're violating federal rules and other state rules on the way that they box out most housing. I mean, it's all single family housing there, which maybe could lead to a lawsuit. But going back to the legislature, which is dominated by the suburbs, what can be done to actually make it move? This is for Gary.
So the legislature is tough when it comes to this issue. You may know that in 2017, there was an effort to basically gut 830G. There was a compromise bill that kept us from gutting it, but the legislature has had an intention to move in the wrong direction on this. I think that what needs to happen is we need for legislators who understand that affordable housing is important to make sure that that's not a real possibility. I also think that we have to expand the conversation so that what we're talking about is not just affordable housing in the inner cities, but we're also talking about affordable housing, if people should choose so, that goes beyond that to areas where we have higher opportunity. And that's when you really get this conversation going in a way that is not beneficial to the people that we're talking about. I've been accused of trying to bring people into the suburbs. To a degree, I guess that is part of the conversation, because I think we should have access to affordable housing in the cities. We should have access to affordable housing in the suburbs. I think it's a complete package that we have to be talking about. But this legislature has been very difficult. And for years prior to that, I had been keeping us from moving in that direction. But when we had a legislature where the Republicans in the Senate were also in power, if you will, the voting in terms of the committees became a different structure. And that's when you saw us moving in the wrong direction.
Jason.
I think that we have to have a regional approach, and we have to put incentives. We've relied on 830G, and which is a punitive approach, and we haven't engaged our neighbors in the suburbs. And I just think it has to be a regional approach. I think smaller towns have to be able to group together to get credit for affordable housing. Let them use a regional approach, use each town's resources, and come up with a plan, especially along thoroughfares like Route 1 or Derby Avenue or what have you, and get credit for developing affordable housing. But I would also submit that right here in New Haven, we need to do a much better job in terms of affordable housing and the housing conditions, period. As I've gone around, and our senior buildings are in need of real capital investments. When the last nor'easter came and knocked out power, We have seniors that are on third, fourth, fifth floor on oxygen with no generators in their buildings. I've been in a number of senior buildings, and I would not be comfortable putting, a grandma there or somebody that I cared about in those buildings. And so I'm going to be an advocate to make sure that our housing stock here in New Haven is safe and a quality. And I think we have a lot to do here in the city in terms of economic development. We've talked about bringing a TIF to help finance some of these different projects, whether it be in Allentown and West Haven or on Long Wharf or on El Grasso Boulevard and some of our gateways. There's a lot of other things that we can be doing and should be doing. And as a senator, I'll be introducing enabling legislation and working with our municipal leaders to try to bring some real creative and thoughtful solutions. And housing is definitely an area that New Haven can do better. Yes, we need to ask our neighboring towns, I'm going to wrap, our neighboring towns to do better. And we should do that by allowing them a regional approach and incentives, but we also need to do much better here.
So just if I can maybe get 10, 20 seconds. I think in the compromise bill, what was purported by those who wanted to eviscerate and then compromise on the bill was that they needed some incentives and we would see affordable housing popping up. That didn't happen. The reality is they don't want affordable housing where they are. So if we're going to have this conversation and include them, we have to have the conversation about the fact that they don't want it and they're doing what they have to do to eliminate affordable housing.
Thank you both. I'm going to ask one more question, and I may, if it's okay with you, only give you 60 seconds to respond rather than 90, since we're nearing the end and I want to make sure to give you time to ask each other questions. But the one I wanted to end with is that each cataclysm that our country, our city, our region has experienced this year, from the pandemic to the episodes of police brutality, rampant unemployment, has seemed to offer a kind of X-ray look at the persistence of systemic racial inequality in our region, our city, and in our country. And just earlier this week, Congresswoman Johanna Hayes, a town hall she was hosting on Zoom, was hijacked by racist trolls who posted a lot of terrible epithets and a much more direct racist attack than some of the more systemic issues that have come to light in recent months. I want to ask me, starting with the senator and then going over to Jason, what that racist troll attack of Johanna Hayes' town hall said to you about state of race relations in Connecticut, and about what the past few months have revealed to you or clarified for you about the persistence of racial inequality.
Yeah, so what it said to me is that we have people who are racist who feel comfortable behind a screen and anonymity to say the things that they know. But I mean, it's not a surprise, right? I've experienced that. I think some of you even saw last year when I did the 2019 bill that there were police who said that they should take the N and drag them back to slavery and chains, right? And if you follow my Twitter stream, you'll see a lot of that kind of stuff. So it is what happens, particularly when you are Black and advocating for issues for Black people, or issues that these kind of people don't want to have advocated for. Even when you look at the legislature, you don't have people saying racist things, but you have them echoing the policies that keep racism ensconced in what we have. So I'm not surprised by it. It's offensive, yes, but it's not surprising. But while that's happening, we have a responsibility to find ways to move the people who are subject to that forward, and that's really the job that I hold currently.
Thank you, Jason.
I mean, are we surprised? I mean, is anyone in New Haven surprised? I think, is any Black or brown person surprised that we have racism? I mean, I'm not surprised. I've been dealing with it my whole life. I was a legislator, was called all kinds of things and trolled. We have racism, homophobia, sexism, ism. So, I have deep roots in the community. It's something that you have to overcome, and it's something where you have to work together but in our community and outside our community to, move the ball forward. So I think, I mean, it's very unfortunate. And I think that this president has brought out the worst. I've said, that for the first time in my life, I thought about getting a gun permit myself because it just feels like things are going to go sideways sometimes with the President of the United States. So it's incumbent upon us to vote to get new leadership, I think, at the top of the country, because I think that a lot of this stuff comes down. But more importantly, I think it's time for us in the city to unite and to look at the inequities that we know that are there and to work together to problem solve those inequities so that we're helping our brothers and sisters move forward. And that's where my commitment is.
Thank you. And now we're near the end. We have, I think, just enough time for each of you to ask the other a question, and then we'll give 60 seconds to respond. So, Jason, I'm going to ask you to go first to ask the senator a question, and then let the senator ask you a question. So, Jason, what do you want to ask Senator Winfield?
I want to go back and I want to ask the senator why he voted to bail out Hartford $500 million, and yet knowing that New Haven has so much non-taxable property, knowing that Pilot is not funded $471 million, why New Haven has not gotten anything, why it's not getting its fair share, and why he's not being an advocate when he was more than happy to change the trajectory of Hartford and to the tune of $500 million. Why is New Haven, why did we get a cut of $9.5 million, and why did you stand for that?
So I assume that Jason, if I follow the conversation that he has been having, I assume he's going back to the budget that came out in 2017. Would that be correct? I just want to make sure I answer the question you're asking.
You don't remember when you bailed out Hartford?
No, because I didn't bail out Hartford. So I'm asking you a question to clarify.
You bailed out Hartford, $500 million.
Well, if you don't know,
I would say Senator may just respond to what Jason said, and
sure.
We'll just go from there.
So I'm going to make some assumptions since he doesn't want to clarify that it was in the budget. And as Jason knows, being a legislator, lots of people who have an agenda would like to pull parts of the budget apart to show that someone did one thing or the other. But the budget is a complete document, and there are different sources of funding. So that's how these things happen. Any legislator who's existed knows how these things happen. And the reason why someone would pull it apart is because they don't have much else to talk about. Obviously, the New Haven delegation, because it's not one individual, New Haven delegation is working to meet every need that the city has. That's what we do. There have been criticisms over the years of the New Haven delegation, and I'm sure that Jason knows that because he wasn't always in New Haven. So, look, we are making a budget happen. But I will say on the 2017 budget, initially, when we first passed the budget, I actually voted against that budget because it was problematic, not only for the city, but for the state. And
if I could ask you to wrap up in a sentence.
And then later they went back and fixed some of those problems. But anyone who's been a legislator knows how these things happen. And it's not right to kind of represent what happened and not tell a full story.
And now, Senator Winfield, I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask Mr. Bartlett a question.
Sure. So, Mr. Bartlett, you have a tendency to come up with some good ideas, express yourself really well. The follow-through isn't always what one would expect. You're attempting to malign my record, but how would you possibly do a better job given your history of not always having the best follow-through?
Know what follow through you're talking about. I think I have excellent follow through. Very proud of my record here in the city of New Haven. Talked about 200 expulsions down to 14, 700 kids in youth stat wraparound services. President Obama's White House recognized that. A number of other, Bloomberg recognized our program. Baltimore copied our program. Hartford's trying to emulate our program. So I'm very proud of my record in New Haven. I'm very proud of my record as a legislator. The first bill that I did was a landmark bill, raising the age that kids could quit school. I changed it from 16 to 17, only one of 4 states. And you helped me do that by voting for it. And it was difficult because we had a press conference one day and we spoke about how difficult it was because they said that, it costs too much money to educate kids. And I stood up and I said, no, this is what we're going to do. And I did that time and time again. So how I'm going to be different is I'm going to lead. I'm going to recognize the power that you have as a senator. And sometimes you just have to say no, Gary. You have to say no to the governor. You know, you put aside your own personal ambition and you take the shots and you use your capital, your political capital, to advance the interests of your city. I know how a budget works, and I've been willing to vote against a Democratic budget. You know what's going to be great? As a petitioning candidate, I'm not going to be beholden to party bosses that are going to tell me what to do. I'm actually going to be able to be there for the people of the city, for the youth, for the seniors, for the taxpayers.
Wrap it up in a sentence, Jason.
That's going to be the difference, is I'm going to be there for the people. And as somebody who's an independent, you know, they're going to have to come to me now. And I like that change. And I do know the system, and I think you failed because there's no way you cut your own city $9.5 million and give another city $500 million when we have the exact same demographics.
We are at 8:01. We're just about at the end of this debate. I'm so grateful to everyone for participating in this, but I want to end, as I promised at the start, by giving each of the candidates 90 seconds to give some closing remarks. So Jason Bartlett is the petition candidate. I'm going to give you the floor first, and then Senator Winfield will close us out with his own 90-second remarks. So Jason, the floor is yours for the next 90 seconds.
Thank you. I'm running for the Martha Haggerts, who's a senior here in New Haven, who needs help, who needs the system to hear her and to assist her, whether it's getting her vouchers for SNAP or assisting her in terms of her healthcare needs. I'm running for Macy Andujar, who went to the senator when Judge Edmonds did a lot of bad things as a judge. And she went to the senator and said, Senator, I need your help. We can't have this judge on the bench. And the senator dismissed her, did not listen to her. It was this constituent here in New Haven had to go to other legislators to get their attention to actually take on Judge Edmonds, which was finally done. I'm here for the Demisha Moores, who went to the senator and said, Senator, this judge has done improprieties, and please don't vote for him. Delay the vote and look into this issue, and testified in front of judiciary. As a Black woman, she asked him, please hear me. And he had made a deal and just pushed the person through and didn't even take the time to look to see what those improprieties are. That's why I'm running. I'm running because the Hartford has just given $11 million to Hartford to reopen schools, but given us $2.5 million, and our kids can't go to school because they're not safe. That's why I'm running. I'm running because we need a change. The senators had 12 years in Hartford. It's time for a change, new ideas, new blood, and independence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jason Bartlett. And Senator Winfield, you have 90 seconds for your closing remarks.
Thank you. And I'm running to continue the work of helping people. Anybody can go and find somebody who has a disagreement, somebody who feels as though they didn't get what they wanted. But my record speaks to what I've been doing. Jason talked about his first bill. I think many people know my first bill was a death penalty. And that was to show people that things that people say were possible weren't possible. We've done, thank you to all the people who helped me. We've done a bill that made sure that in public accommodation, people had transgender rights. We did the first in the nation prosecutorial transparency bill so that we can actually know what's going on in our courts. We've done various police accountability bills. We did the first in the nation trust act so that our neighbors don't have to worry about the fact that the federal government is coming in. My focus has been on the people of the city of New Haven and their issues and making it happen for them at the state capitol. That is going to continue to be my focus. And when I put my focus to it, we actually get those things done. And Mr. Bartlett talks about all of the things that he's done, but we all know that there are things that didn't get completed the way that he suggests. He was, associated with the escape. That did not come out the way that it was supposed to come out. He was associated with the projects that were going on. He likes to tout the burn grant that the federal government, the New Haven applied for, but that didn't turn out the way that we thought it should turn out. there are a lot of things that Mr. Bartlett has done, including being a state representative, that didn't turn out to be all that productive. He talks about that bill over and over again, but he doesn't talk about the other bills he did because there weren't that many. That's the difference. I actually make it happen.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Gary Winfield, the endorsed Democrat and Working Families Party candidate, Jason Bartlett, a petitioning independent candidate for the state Senate's 10th district. Carlos Alvarado is also running in that race, a Republican who decided not to participate in this. But we've got Gary Winfield, Jason Bartlett, Carlos Alvarado, and I want to thank the panel of reporters, Mary O'Leary, Babs Rawls-Ivy, and Norma Rodriguez-Reyes. Harry Droz, the man behind the controls at WNHH, thank you so much for making this happen. And anyone listening, go out and vote. November 3rd is election day. You can vote in person at the polls. There are plenty of ways that anyone can vote absentee in the state and in the city. So go out and vote. That is the message I'd like to leave y'all with. And you can check this recording out of this debate on Facebook, the New Haven Independent's Facebook page, and we'll have an article on it on newhavenindependent.org. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, candidates, for participating, and thank you, reporter friends, for asking great questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.